Robben Ford is by far one of my biggest influences on guitar. I mean, top 3 all time. Particularly, he's a big influence in the rhythm guitar department for me. I've learned a lot from him, and I particularly love his use of triads for blues rhythm. I want to show you a simple blues shuffle in G, and we're going to substitute triads over top of the dominant chords to give us some more interesting options for playing blues rhythm. You'll see Robben do this a lot, and it's one of the things that I'm so thankful I learned from him because it's really permeated a lot of my rhythm playing. And if you get just a handle on it a little bit, you'll be able to do it in your own playing as well. As long as you know your triads, you're going to be able to play cool stuff like this. So some cool stuff right there, lots of triads, and we're going to talk about why it all works and how you can put it into your playing relatively quickly. But first, we just got to heap the praise on Robben because I've learned so much from him. He's been such a huge influence, and I want you to go support anything he's ever done or is continuing to do, whether in the music realm or in the educational space. Please support what I think is the master of blues rhythm guitar, Robben Ford. He's a living legend and we need to treat him like one, so go support Robben. So let's talk about why this works, putting triads over top of dominant 7 chords. And keep in mind, I was using them as like passing chords. I wasn't like living on a particular triad. I was always kind of coming back to that G7, establishing the sound, and then using triads in a really kind of, colorful way to spruce up the progression. You can do that too. And we're going to talk about 2 ways you can understand this. We're going to do sort of a baseline approach, and then we'll do a deeper theoretical approach to really satisfy all the folks that are watching this that, think in different ways. Some of us think, kind of lean mean with our theory. Some of us want to go deep and dive into it and really understand. We'll cover both. So let's talk about a G7 chord. The triads I was using over top of it were obviously G, because that lives in the chord. And then we did F, and we also did a C. So all of those triads actually give us what we would call extensions on the G7. So we're adding other notes to the chord. Just think about that. You've heard of G9s, G11s, G13s. All those numbers are extended notes beyond the normal 4-note 7th chord. Let's talk about that. So when we play an F against that G7, momentarily what it's giving us is an F note, which is a flat 7 of the G, an A, which is the 9, a C, which could be called the 11th, or maybe even a sus type of sound that it's giving us. So if we go, the C, you'll hear Robben and players like this go, and then always reestablish that 7th chord. But it's a great little move to get you in and out of chords, do something that's a little more interesting. So what does the C triad give us? Well, that gives us a G, a C, of course, which is the root, an E, which is like the 13th for G. Okay, so it's gonna give us a little bit of that type of flavor against it. But when you're shuffling or you're playing something funky and you're doing it like Robben would, those notes go by quite seamlessly and make for a fun rhythm part. It's really fun to do, and especially when you're doing funky stuff. You You've probably heard this kind of thing before. We're landing on a G7, but we're approaching it from an F triad, C triad, G, okay? So what's an easy way to think about that? Well, if we're thinking about G7, I'm in my sort of guitar infancy, I would say, it's just a whole step below, triad, and a fourth above, triad, okay? Whole step below is F, fourth above is C. Easy, you can think about it like that all day. But there's one more way to think about it, and this is the more theoretical approach, and you need to understand this as we move to other chords in our progression, okay? So bear with me, because a lot of people say, you lost me at theory, and then they click off the video. Stick with me, you might learn something valuable. I explain things to the lowest of level because that's how I need to understand it too, okay? So here we go. So now, theory-wise, G7 is a chord that is built from a C major scale. How is that possible? Well, if we take a C major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth degree of that scale is a G note. And if we build triads continuing up the scale, i.e. skipping a note, so the next note's A, we want to skip that, we want to go to B. Continue that process, the next note is D. Continue that process, the next note would be F. Those four notes are played in succession or played all together, gives us a G7 chord. So it's fair to say a G7 comes from the key of C, and oftentimes you hear people say, well, that's Mixolydian because it's fit off the fifth of C. Sure, yeah. Go ahead and think of it that way. Now, what other chords are in the key of C? Well, of course, a C triad and an F triad. So once you're playing that G7 chord, it's kind of like you're playing in C. And you can play chords or triads that you stole from the key of C against that G7 chord. C, F, G, F, C, F, G7. Do it anywhere. So that's the theory side of it, all right? So the way I would process that, I'm like, well, if I'm playing a G7, I know I have C, that's the 1, and F, that's the 4, and G, that's the 5. It gets confusing thinking about two keys at one time, but there's some folks out there that want to know that that's where that's coming from. You'll often hear this even referred to as triad pairs. Now, I don't like to muddy the water. I've given you enough information in a short period of time already. Triad pairs is a thing that you'll see on the internet a lot. But just know that those triads are your options. And the reason I don't stress the triad pair too much is because we can kind of play almost any chord that's in the key of C and it'll work over that G7 chord. It's pretty cool. In the triad realm, at least anyway. So let's talk about what happens when we get to the 4 chord. 4 chord is a C9 in this instance. So I think to myself, well, that's a C7. I added the 9. Okay, so I'm getting a little fancier there. C7 or C9 is the fifth of F. So now I got to use my theory, or I can also use the shortcut I gave you earlier. I can do a whole step below the C triad. Here's a C triad. Whole step below, that's B flat. Fourth above C is F. So all those triads, C, B flat, or F, will work when I go to the 9 chord. And what's interesting is right in that C9 chord, I have a B flat and a D, so I'm almost playing a B flat triad anyway. So if we're playing our shuffle with these triad moves like we did earlier, we have a G, 3, 4. We're gonna play F, G, maybe a little C, F, C, G, C9. I have B flat. I could do B flat, F, back to G. Try this stuff. D9. Now I have, you've heard that before. What people were doing was playing a D triad and a C triad. You could kind of try to sneak a G triad in there if you wanted, because that's the formula. Whole step below and then a fourth up, right? But you don't really have much time in a blues because there's just one chord, one bar of that 5 in that moment. So just some fun there, bebopping around with those triad ideas over a G7, a C9, and a D9. My favorite way to practice this is find a one-chord vamp. If you have a looper, just play that G. And loop some triads against it. Try it in different spots. Okay, so there's triads everywhere. And I like to stay in the middle 4 strings of the guitar. That seems to really be the ticket for me. Okay, so different ways to look at playing triads against a dominant 7 chord. We've heard them over the 1, the 4, and the 5 in the blues. We talked about a theory approach. We talked about more of a sort of street level approach, how you can remember it quickly, a whole step below, 4th above, play those triads. And a lot of it, I think, will spell itself out in the transcription when you get it under your fingers and you start playing it to the track. Okay, so make sure you download that stuff. Free as always, just click the link. It'll ask you to sign up to the free YouTube collection. It's got hundreds of different lessons in there and guitar demos and free, tracks and tabs. So take advantage of that. It's a good resource. So cool stuff, right? Superimposing these triads over a dominant chord can really give you a lot of the sort of stuff that Robben does in his rhythm playing that I've just gotten so much out of and admired for many, many years. I can't stress it enough. I'd love for you to support what I'm doing, but please go and check out all of the many lessons he's done over the years. I have VHS tapes and DVDs from the man, and obviously loved his music and seen him play many times. I've gotten to meet him a few times. He has remembered me, but called me Cody. That's okay. No problem. I get it. You meet a lot of people when you're as famous and as talented as Robben. So no big deal there. He'll remember me someday, maybe. In any case, this was about really shining a light on one of the things that maybe we don't look at as deeply about Robben's playing. If you liked what I've taught you and what you've seen, please consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to download all the goodies below, like the PDF and the track. All right, I'll see you guys on another lesson. Till next time, keep practicing.